Hello, hello, and hello. All right, welcome to Pulumi's first office hours, or at least the first office hours in a very long time. My name is David Flanagan. You may know me as Rockcode across the internet, and I am joined by two of my wonderful colleagues, Lee and Susan. Hello there. How are you both?
Good.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you both for joining me. Would you both like to start off with a little introduction to our audience?
Sure, I'll go first. So you may have seen me around the community Slack. I work on the solutions engineering team now, so mainly helping our customers achieve their cloud goals with Pulumi, helping them do implementation, helping them understand the product, and helping them build awesome cloud architecture with the many myriad features that Pulumi has.
Cool. I'm Susan. I lead the user experience team at Pulumi. It's a cross-disciplinary team of designers and engineers. We work across all Pulumi features. We do user research and design work and implementation. I'm also fairly active in Slack. Susan EV is my name.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right. Before we kick things off today, I am going to cover first our code of conduct. So this is a Pulumi TV live stream, and as such is bound by the code of conduct that we use on the main Pulumi repository. I won't read this verbatim, but you can find it at github.com/Pulumi in the code of conduct markdown file. In short, please just be kind to each other, especially in the comments and to our hosts here. If you have any doubts about anything that you're uncomfortable about, there is an email address down at the bottom, codeofconduct@pulumi.com, where you can reach out and let us know, and we will handle that. So please be kind. All right, so we're going to start off today by getting to know Susan a little bit more and talking about user experience at Pulumi. So would you like to kind of start us off by telling us a little bit about what the roles and responsibilities for user experience are and what you get up to?
Sure. The roles of areas of responsibility is pretty vast, but we are interested in the entire user experience of using Pulumi, from installation, from the get started guides, from consulting the docs, to using the CLI and using the service. We work across all the features. And our work is guided by user research. We just did a round of interviews last week, and we're going to start up usability studies soon. Yeah, and our goal really is to help solve user problems and make things better for everybody.
What are some of the interesting challenges then that you've kind of discovered or tried to solve as part of your user experience work here?
What are the interesting challenges?
Like, has there been anything that you've just been like, wow, this is a really common problem and a really easy fix? Or do you find that things are more convoluted than that? Like, I'm really curious.
Yeah, I should have probably prepared these questions ahead of time. We've had a mix of we have identified things that are pretty significantly painful, and we could just do a small fix to make it better versus having to totally redesign things or rethink things. In general, we work best if we can kind of be included when we're first talking about the problem, so we can kind of raise problems and ask questions and involve users. I don't know. I'm kind of hand waving answering the question. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's just nice to kind of understand and kind of appreciate the work that goes on here, because Pulumi is a CLI tool. It's a SaaS with a web application. It's all these providers. Some of them first party, some of them third party. Like the landscape that your average Pulumi customer, user, etc. touches is quite vast, which I mean probably puts quite a lot on a user experience team, I would imagine.
Yeah. I can share a couple specific things. In general, yes, like the whole team is very interested in how people move between the different features, why they choose to move between them, and how we clearly communicate like why they're moving between them. And that's something like we're actively working to make better now. From the CLI perspective, like we are interested in like, are users getting feedback so they know what's going on? When things go wrong, are they given good information about how to fix it and where the problem lies, those kinds of things. In the service right now, we're actively working on the dashboard that exists there. And that's what we did our interviews for. And we identified a number of pain points around like who the dashboard is for, what type of users are benefiting from it. And we're more than likely going to be overhauling those to either have separate dashboards depending on your role, or being able to like customize where you land when you log into the service. And then another thing we're actively working on now is the service navigation, which is actually extremely painful. It's really difficult to know where you are. We hide and show navigation. It's pretty difficult. Most users who are taking an action in Pulumi and then going to the service want to get to the update and then answer a question about the update that they ran, like look at the resources, do things there. But it's actually fairly difficult to get there. And you don't even know that that navigation exists until you've gone multiple levels in. So we're going to be pulling a lot of that out so people can get to where they need to quickly and answer their questions quickly within, and still understand the context that they're within. Is any of that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually the three of us here all work on different teams, but we all are kind of trying to solve a very common problem, which is listening to our customers and our users, understanding where their frustrations are, and trying to do our best to make their lives a little bit easier. You know, Lee, you're working on the solution engineering, sales engineering side. You're working with customers day in, day out, right? And I guess you're probably hearing a lot of frustrations that those customers have, and being able to share them and provide a feedback cycle between user experience. I do DevRel, so I work with a slightly different type of customer, but still people using Pulumi as well daily. I never really thought about that before we scheduled our first office hours, but we're all trying to achieve a similar goal, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think my approach is more tactical. Like, how can I help you get where you need to be right now? And I think having the user experience team is a more long-term vision, long-term goal thing, which I think means we're going to be continuously driving towards a better user experience. We don't want you to be frustrated now, and we also want things to get better over time. And I think those two combinations really show how much we care about user experience here at Pulumi. I think first opportunity to drop the event on Wednesday, but a lot of the stuff that we're going to be announcing this week is based on user feedback. And we really listen to the users to make sure that we are kind of incorporating things into their everyday experience to make things better.
Nice. All right. Well, you mentioned that we have an event on. Is it Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday. Wow.
You may have heard about it.
Let me pull that up here. So we have Pulumi Up, the Cloud Awakens on May the 4th and the 5th. So yeah, just less than 2 days, and we've got like this feature-packed event with some pretty cool announcements, right? What shall we? What can we share, Lee? What do you feel? What's coming that you want to tell?
You're gonna get me into trouble, David. Well, I think we talked before, and I think Susan mentioned that there's a couple of things that are already out there. We have the Oracle Cloud Provider now, which I think rounds out our support for most of the major cloud providers at this point. And then I think we are actively working on probably one of the oldest customer issues that I can remember, which is support for our AWSX/Crosswalk library in multiple languages. And I know that the team is hard at work turning those into multi-language components. And then we have a couple, or at least 3 announcements which we're not allowed to talk about. So just kind of like teasing you with some exciting future future announcements.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the AWS X kind of multi-language working thing is really interesting. Like, I think is one of the most common questions that I get when I speak to people that are playing with Pulumi. I think there's a lot of value that I get from those more opinionated packages that provide a set of building blocks for them to consume. And I think that's going to be very well received, definitely. I know we already mentioned a lot of the things that we can already talk about in public, but Susan, is there anything that you want to share about Pulumi Up or announcements, or have we covered them all there?
Yeah, I don't have anything additional to share.
Cool. Well, we have a whole bunch of talks and workshops. Now, I was going through this page earlier. I didn't even realize the amount of stuff that we had going on in these 2-day events. I don't know if you've even been down to the bottom of this page, but we've got all these sessions. We've got panels and talks, Q&As, but then there's a whole bunch of workshops as well where people can actually join us. And I think it's a mix of engineers and developer advocates, but you can actually learn how to work with Pulumi in a whole host of different scenarios. I can talk about this one because I'm doing this from zero to production with Pulumi or Kubernetes with the Nginx team, which I'm really excited to deliver. It'll be fun. You doing any workshops, Lee?
Not this time, no. I envisage lots of excitement around the announcements and people trying to get their hands on how to use them. So some of the new features I'm spending this week, rather than building workshops, I'm spending time getting to grips with them and understanding them. I think one of the best parts about being a solutions engineer here, and we are hiring if anybody's watching this, one of the best parts about being a solutions engineer here is that you're always on the kind of edge of your knowledge, and you're always kind of learning new things and kind of consuming things I didn't expect to be writing C# 5 years ago, and I spent all morning writing C#. So it's a really great it's a really great learning model. But keeping on top of it is a full-time job. So I'm looking forward to kind of showing off some of the stuff we've done, and I'm focusing more on that in the workshops this time.
Yeah, I mean, something I kind of wish I had scheduled the first office hours for maybe after Pulumi Up, because seeing some of your demos that you've been posting in some of the channels, it just makes me really excited to kind of show people this and get them playing with it.
I wrote a blog post on my personal blog this morning. I like to keep some of the stuff on my personal blog, and I'm really excited about it. It's very tongue in cheek, but it should be a fun journey. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have Pulumi Up, as we said, is on Wednesday, followed by our community summit, which is on Thursday. And I believe, oh no, I removed it. There was a link to join us, but just go to pulumi.com/pulumi-up. Register, and you can do it all virtually. You don't need to travel anywhere. So let's pop that off. Have you ever joined along any of the workshops, Susan, to see how people get on? Is that maybe a good way to get feedback from people?
Yeah, I did around when I first started. I attended a bunch of them, but I haven't in a long time. It's maybe something that we should consider doing. Yeah.
All right, let's start tackling a couple of questions. So we don't have anything in the chat yet. Fortunately, I have prepared some from our community Slack channel, which we can kind of work through. But if you are watching and you want to ask questions, please feel free to drop them into the YouTube comments, and we will do our best to tackle them. All right, let's grab question number 1. This is from Joa. Is it possible to render Kubernetes YAML with Pulumi?
It certainly is. So you might want to do something like this if you are kind of following a GitOps patterns where you have an external execution mechanism that kind of deploys things to your cluster, but you want to get the Pulumi authoring experience using kind of familiar programming languages. And the way that you would do this is there is a resource option resource provider option that will render any Pulumi Kubernetes code to a YAML file in a directory. And that's really useful if you want to use something like Argo CD or Flux. Or you just want to look at the YAML that is generated and see how that looks. I wouldn't say this is the most popular path to take, because a lot of users like to get the Pulumi authoring and execution mechanism. But if you're already kind of using Argo CD and you're tired of templating YAML files and using Go templates or Python templates or whatever to render those things, then it's certainly an option.
Yeah. I think that's where, like before I joined Pulumi, I think I spent a lot of my time using the render to YAML. But then I think it was possibly this time last year. In fact, was it maybe October? Maybe I'm just being completely wrong. But Pulumi released the Kubernetes operator, which kind of changed my mindset a little bit to the point where I don't think I've ever rendered YAML from Pulumi anymore because I rely on the Kubernetes operator to run inside of my cluster and do the Pulumi up for me, which I think is a really strong story for doing continuous delivery with Pulumi. Is that something that either of you have played with or seen other people using at all?
I think you see a lot. We've seen a lot of customers adopt the Kubernetes operator at some really large scale. So I see it all the time, and there's certainly some very large household names that you would definitely know using the Kubernetes operator in production on my side. I think discoverability is really something about these particular questions that we could improve, because it's my opinion that you should be able to search for this particular question and get a reasonable answer out of your favorite search engine. So that's something that comes up quite a lot.
Well, you've been doing some work on that though recently, right?
I
We can
have
talk about
indeed.
that now. We
Yeah,
can
we
talk
can.
about that.
The blog should be coming out later today. Yeah, and so we have this community Slack where I think these questions have been searched, retrieved from. And Slack is a great chat tool, but is not always the best community management tool because a lot of the information stays behind Slack's wall garden. And we have partnered with a brand new company called Linen to bring out the ability to search for all this stuff. So if you go to archive.pulumi.com, you will be able to search for these kind of questions directly from there.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. I think this solves one of those major problems that a lot of open source companies go down the route of having a Slack, but it gets very expensive when you want to be able to keep those messages for longer than the 10,000 message limit or whatever it is. I can't remember exactly. So this is a really interesting tool that just kind of aggregates that or consolidates it in some way and allows it to be discoverable long afterwards. I think it's really cool.
I spoke with the founder when we kind of set this up, and I think the question that comes up a lot is, are you trying to get around the Slack message limits? And I don't think that's the intention. The intention is just to make things searchable. So we're not planning on kind of going back and adding all of the the existing chat conversation. It's mainly just from now going forward, at least that will be archived in a way where users can use it.
Nice. Very cool. I like this a lot. All right. Let's grab another question. So the next one is, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Undead Ops? Yeah. I was going to say Undead Ops, and then I realized that I'm just being absolutely daft. Undead Ops. Are there any examples for alternatives to a huge main func for creating a bunch of resources? This question was asked on the Go channel, so I guess we should keep it Go centric, but I guess we can also give some general advice across all of the supported languages.
So we have a concept of something called a component resource, which I am going to, kind of point out that is not always the most discoverable name, but a component resource is an abstraction that allows you to create groupings of Pulumi resources that then you can deploy to your cloud. And it's available across all languages. So a component resource in a Go is a method on the Pulumi context. And then in TypeScript is a standard object-oriented class. And in Python and .NET it is as well. Very common pattern to group things into component resources, which will then allow you to reduce and shrink the Go kind of like main func or the main Pulumi program. Now, I personally am not in love with the name component resource because it's not super discoverable, and I will defer to you two folks on what you think about that kind of naming, but that is generally what we go to.
Naming is hard, right? I guess you must see this all the time, Susan.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, can you just say a little bit more, Lee, about the undiscoverableness of the name, just so I understand?
I think the term component is a very high level hand wavy thing, whereas other infrastructure as code tools have very specific searchable, searchable nomenclature. If you search for Pulumi component, you get either a custom resource or a component resource, and like a lot of the naming kind of overlaps and is very close to each other, and it's sometimes really hard to differentiate between things. And so, what I'm really hoping for at some point in the future is that we have a big usability study around the naming of things, and we start to try and rethink some of the naming, because it's still early enough in our life cycle that we can possibly change the names of some of these things.
Cool, thank you.
I think we tried to call them packages as well, and it's not really stuck very well.
But that's another one of those really generic terms that doesn't really give you a lot of detail into what you're working with. I think we should call it like the Pulumi Lego brick or something. just go completely random on it. Maybe that doesn't help either. But component and package seem like very overused terms generally across most software things. So, yeah,
Agreed.
tough challenge. All right, let's see. So yeah, I think we answered that. Lee says use component resources. I always tell people never to be scared of the almighty function as well. Like you're going to encapsulate lots of things in functions in any of our supported languages, and that's a pretty good way of doing it as well. I'm going to loop this straight into the next question because I feel they're kind of related. Like once you built an abstraction, well, how do we share it and make it consumable? So David asks, is it possible to publish a TypeScript Pulumi project to npm?
It is possible to publish a component resource to your package manager of choice, depending on your language. So npm for TypeScript, PyP for Python, NuGet for .NET, and Go modules for Go. It's not possible to take a current Pulumi project. So the index.ts, or the main file that you get from the Pulumi new command, it's not possible to publish that, and I don't really think there's many reasons why you would want to do that at the moment. But when you group all these resources together and create component resources, it's very, very common to publish those. And you can also do this in multi-language as well. So you can write it in one language and publish to all the other language package managers. The tutorials here are probably not as good as we would like them to be. And I think there is an initiative to certainly improve the multi-language authoring experience and the component authoring experience so that you can understand. One thing I think is always interesting here is that when you adopt Pulumi, and especially when you go down multi-languages, you get to inherit all of the foibles of every language. And so every language you want to support, you have to have at least an understanding of how NPM works and how PyPy works. We at Pulumi do not have as much control over that as we would like. And I think there's some initiatives on the multi-language side to make this a seamless experience. And I know that Susan is going to be involved in some of that kind of like decision-making process. But yeah, it's possible to publish any component resource to your package manager of choice, including npm.
It sounds like Susan's just involved in like every single project.
Well, I mean, users are involved in everything, right? So, and if our user experiences it can be improved, then that's really what we need at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Definitely. Okay, were you going to add anything there, Susan?
Oh, I was just going to say I've learned a lot about prioritizing in my position at Pulumi.
Yeah, I guess it's just we have a very cool tool that loads of people want to use in their own weird and wonderful ways. I'm always amazed by some of the questions we get in some of our community channels by what people are just trying to do. And with that language support as well that we have almost across the board, it's just so much that. But it's fun, right? Good problems to be solving. Okay, we've got 2 more questions that we'll tackle, and we'll try and finish in the next 3 or 4 minutes. So Topher asks, is there any way to have Pulumi use Yarn out of the gate rather than have it bootstrap an initial project with npm?
I think I'm going to let you answer that one, David, because you learned something about this that I didn't know. So yeah, I think I'm gonna defer to you for that one.
Well, I was going to say, well, you should start first with something that I think challenges a lot of people's basic instinct.
I mean, my answer was actually Pulumi projects are just a TypeScript project. So if you add a package.json and a TS config and an index file, you can do all those things manually. You then need to add a Pulumi.yaml so the Pulumi CLI and engine knows which runtime you're using and has a name for the project. But it turns out there is a better way of using Yarn, and I'll give it over to you at that point.
Yeah. So, well, you can add Pulumi to any project. If you do want to use the Pulumi templating with the Pulumi new command, and you want to use Yarn, there is an environment variable that you can set. And I should actually have been a bit more prepared and have that available. So I'll do that now. But it's a Pulumi prefer Yarn, which is here. Yep, you can set Pulumi prefer Yarn to true, and instead of using npm, you will get Yarn support, or at least it will use Yarn out of the box. I didn't know that either until someone chipped in on the answers. It's always good to check out what's happening in the community. So.
This environment variables page as well is incredibly useful. It has all of the kind of like hidden and experimental features. We gate them all behind environment variables. So if there's lots of things on there that I certainly discovered that become really useful.
Yeah. All right, so I'll throw up our last question. We do have one in the live chat as well, which we'll get to in just a second. But let's tackle this one first from Michael. So Michael wants to know, well, I'll ask Lee first to describe, or maybe Susan can tackle it, what is a stack reference? But then they want to know if they can use stack references without using the Pulumi backend. So who wants to tackle the what is a stack reference?
Y'all can take it.
All right, off you go, Lee.
StackReference. So when you create a Pulumi program, you get a bunch of resources, and those resources have outputs, which is the response from the cloud provider API. So as an example, when you create an EC2 instance in AWS, you may ask for a public IP address, and that public IP address is an output. Now, oftentimes you want to pass some of these outputs from one Pulumi program to another. A very common use case here is you create a VPC in one Pulumi program, an AWS VPC or a Google Cloud VPC in one Pulumi program, and then you want to have a completely separate Pulumi program that provisions your worker compute instances. A stack reference will allow you to pass values from one Pulumi program to another. And you have to export that output before using it, but then you can reference it in a downstream project. This is relatively straightforward in the Pulumi service because it is you just have to reference the organization that you are using and the name of the project and then the stack that you wish to grab the output from. However, if you are using an open source backend, you are also able to do that, but you have to be quite thoughtful in the way that you name your projects and stacks, because the open source backends don't have the concept of an organization, and so they don't have that logical naming separator. And so I think, David, you said you were going to add some color here. I know you've used the open source backends extensively.
Yeah, I think you tackled it all, but you can't. I just say you can definitely use stack references. But I think the only caveat that we have right now, I don't know if you mentioned that there, Lee, but they have to live in the same bucket. So as long as you use a single bucket and have your Pulumi project write your stack to that bucket, you can use stack references by using the name of the other project and stack. But like Lee says, there's no concept of an organization. So you just have to structure it a little bit differently. But stack references are a very powerful pattern with Pulumi, especially as we see more teams adopting the platform engineering strategy, which is to have a platform engineering team. Typically, it provides a Kubernetes API, but the Pulumi downstream developers want to be able to target that cluster without even knowing where that cluster lives. I use stack references myself in exactly this way, and I've seen other companies do that too. So it's very, very cool pattern. Were you going to add anything there?
No, I think you nailed it.
All right, so our live question came from Blake, and I caught it a little bit late, so we're going to have to stitch it together and work out what this was in reference to, but I think it was in reference to component resources being published to NPM. So Blake asks, so are those like the component hub, like CDK construct hub? Now, we do have something similar to that ourselves. Would we say the registry is like that?
Yes. So the registry has all Pulumi packages in it, and a package can be a provider. So something that talks to a cloud provider, and a package can also be a component. And there is a very handy box on the registry page that will allow you to switch between them. So you can say, show me all the packages, or show me all the components, or show me everything. So the registry is our kind of one-stop shop for all of the Pulumi content. And, as new components get created, they get added to the registry, and you are able to kind of track them down and use them that way.
Yep, and here it is here. You can go to pulumi.com/registry.
And I think it's that type filter, right, Susan? The one on the left? Yeah, there we are.
Native provider, providers, and if you just want to share components, lots of cool stuff in here too. Yeah, check it out. All right, we've went a little over the 30 minutes that we kind of scheduled for. So I just want to say thank you both for joining me. It's been good fun. Our first office hours. I'm sure we're going to do many more throughout the rest of the year. So if you want to get your questions in, drop them in our Slack, drop them in the comments section, and we'll do our best to tackle them. Any final words from Lee or Susan?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, now the awkward bit where we can all just look and wait until the stream ends. But thanks for joining me, and I'll see you all soon.